So, welcome to a slightly delayed afternoon session. We're going from water and rocks to culture and resistance. And my name is Ross Frank. I am Associate Professor in Ethnic Studies at UC San Diego, and welcome you here. And also, I want to remind us of and thank the Tongva caretakers who allow us to be here today on their unceded territory. I'd like to introduce the two speakers, and then we will start a conversation, and then you all are invited to join us. We have Dr. Stan Rodriguez, who just finished earning his EDD at the University of California, San Diego, and CSU San Marcos. It's a joint degree. His dissertation examines Kumeyaay heritage language learning. Dr. Rodriguez is also a recently appointed professor at Cuyamaca College and is director of the Kumeyaay Community College, where he's been working on a whole series of courses that are offered through Cuyamaca and other CSUs, as well as the Kumeyaay Community College. He's a tribal council member of the Iipay Nation of Santa Isabel, and he's also a traditional Kumeyaay singer who's known for one of the few folks who can sing the Wildcat series. He teaches culture, ethnobotany, and history. And our other discussant is Maria Montez. She's the director of the cultural department of the Sycuan band of Kumea Nation. So she works with and oversees the museum, the library, coordinates cultural activities, works with the Kumeyaay Community College, of course, and the education department, and works with Kumeyaay on both sides of the border. We had a third discussant, but we were unsuccessful. We're fiercely independent here. We were unsuccessful in getting the third person up to the stage. But she and Marta are founding members of a community organization called Iipay, Native Warrior, founded in Baja and in San Diego, to promote social justice, language reclamation, land issues, medical issues, employment, and creating dialogue between the reservations of San Diego and Baja. All the activities together in both parts of the Kumeyaay Nation. So join me, please, in welcoming our discussants.
Hokai peña mati pecham stanwi nyachuhi nyamakopa witkonam pile helicui nyawewiyupi nyamatayum. Buenas tardes a todos, mi nombre es Stan Rodríguez, yo soy Iipay Kumeyaay de Reserva Santa Isabel en San Diego. Y tenemos 13 reservas indígenas en San Diego y la Marta dice 4, pero yo pienso 6 más reservas en Baja California, México. My name is Stan Rodriguez. I'm an Iipay Kumeyaay tribal council member for the San Isabel band of the Iipay Nation. It's an honor to be here, and I represent one of the 13 Kumeyaay reservations in San Diego, and Marta is from San Jose de las Oras. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself. Cuema.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Sorry, I get lost in LA today, so I came late. But thank you. It's a big honor for me to be with you guys today. And then my cousin, she couldn't make it today, but she's still driving this way. But she came all the way from Baja, so it was farther. And if it was a longer line over there. I'm sorry, in the border to cross, and she didn't make it on time over here. But
she got lost in San Clemente, huh? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, and sitting right over there, this is my 9-year-old son who's in the 4th grade, which means true warrior, and he's the one that's going to be doing the mission project. We'll put it on Facebook. It'll go viral. All right. mai pecha nya we kanap ya mai khan nya wa moya nya hiku ni wara nya pom nya we ta nyuop nyang kuslap nya kanap mai kanap mat mer mayum hat ni wampu pa yo nya pom nyuop kwema.
Well, talking about the missions, we have a very close mission in San Jose. What's the name? Misión de Alcalá. That's in Ejido La Misión, and then it's 27 kilometers from San Jose de la Sora. That's when we are from, and then me and my cousin Paulina, and then so. And the mission, they have a lot of Kumeyaay people over there, you know, as slaves, and then working and the mission and stuff like that, and then slavery, and you know, they don't feed them and stuff like that. And then so we have Patnil, a black dog. He escaped from the mission and then went up to the reservation and gathered more Native warriors and went back to the mission and burned all the mission, destroyed the mission, and you know, tried to kill the fathers and all that, and then but destroy the mission basically, and then free the people who was over there. And thank you to that, you know, we're still here. Otherwise, maybe we'll be all dead by now.
Nyapomnya hiku kusi ai mewa. Pugnaches had ni shme.
Oh yeah. And then I guess when the father was, he was trying to hide because all the Kumeyaay warriors were over there like killing people and stuff. He went and hide under the skirt of a woman over there.
As far as for us in San Diego, San Diego was where first contact with California missions came on the Alta California side. The first person that came was Juan Cabrillo Rodriguez. He came in 1542, landed in San Diego Bay. There were three ships that came. And they do a pageant today where they have somebody impersonating him coming off a boat, and they have people dressed up as Kumeyaay who walk towards a procession, and they kneel in front of them, in front of the Spanish flag and the cross. And this was part of the, how would you say, the romanticized fantasy. That never happened. Actually, Spanish sailors were shot. They were wounded by Kumeyaay because they attempted to come into the territory and hunt and fish without permission. They eventually had to leave. They stayed for about 5 days. So that was the first encounter that we had with the Spaniards. And when they came back again to put a mission, this was in 1769, and they put it in the area called Cosay, which means the dried place. And this is where Old Town San Diego stands today. And what they wanted to do, and we heard different stories, basically putting it together. Russian and English were coming down into California. They were bringing Tlingit people and Aleut people who were trapping for furs. So the Spaniards, they wanted to protect their route. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to set settlements along California, the peninsula, and up the coast of California. So these missions were put in order to, and they were going to subjugate the native people. They were going to teach them Christianity, force Christianity upon them. They were going to teach them rudimentary skills such as blacksmithing, things like that. And they would prepare this group of people to be a servant caste in preparation for Spanish colonists to come. And they would also pay taxes. Well, the people rebelled against that. The first mission was put in 1769 in Cosay, and that was attacked. It was not completely destroyed. It wasn't until November 5th, 1775, that hundreds of Kumeyaay warriors attacked the mission in San Diego, burned it to the ground. Half the warriors also surrounded the Presidio to make sure they couldn't come and fight against what was going on. And they killed Father Jaime and 2 other people. So this started a wave of attacks and reprisals going up and down the peninsula. In Baja, what Martha was talking about, La Misión was attacked. It was burned to the ground. In Santa Catarina, Iipay and Kumeyaay, people attacked the mission over there, burned that to the ground. on the Colorado River by where Fort Yuma is today. 2 missions were put, those were attacked, those were raised, and the people were, the soldiers were killed, and the other people were held. The women and the children were held, and then they were traded off. But the thing that what was happening is these missions that were put up. There were reasons why we fought. There were reasons why we pushed back. And that was because our language, our culture, our history, we didn't need another religion. We have our own religion. We have our own ways. When we talk about our land, and if you ask, the Chumash people, the Hajaman people, the Tongva people out here, same thing with us Kumeyaay people, is this land is our holy land. The different mountains, the ocean, all these things tell a story for us. And it's sacred to us. And when, the Spaniards were coming and saying, and you heard some accounts saying that our marital practices were in question. Actually, they really weren't. Our people were very faithful to each other. And when we talk about our Kumeyaay puberty ceremonies for the boys and the girls, this would be a coming out ceremony to become a man, to become a woman. And during that ceremony, instructions were given to these youth that this is how you conduct yourself as a man. This is how you take care of your family. This is how you take care of the people. Same thing with a woman. This is how you take care of yourself. This is how you take care of a child. This is how you take care of each other. So these ceremonies that were done, these taught us the way to live, the way to live in balance with our families, with our people. But when the Spaniards came in, because we were not married in a Catholic wedding, they considered it blasphemous. Remember what was happening in the Iberian Peninsula, about 50-some years before. They had just pushed out the last of the Moors, send them back to Morocco, and there was this, this militaristic attitude that was going on. So they were going on, and they were attacking other groups. By the time they came to us, there was struggling that was going on, but our people stood fast. And the thing is, when we talk about, these missions today do not look like the missions that were put up during that time, 1769, 1774, 1775. What happened was, in the early 1910, 1920s, what was going on? They wanted to bring people into California. They wanted California to look like this Mediterranean, Spanish colony type of thing. So they rebuilt the missions. They do not look anything like they were before. And what happened with that was this started that romanticized version of California. And this is what we're dealing with today. Because if you really see the real missions, like if you go to La Misión, where Martha's family, and she was talking about Hatnir, or Black Dog. That was a war chief that attacked that mission. Martha's a direct descendant of them, of this man. And it's just rubble. It's just some pieces of adobe just laying down. But there's this whole romanticized thing about the missions have come back. And as I said before, my anger around it is, what did it do to the people? What did it do to the indigenous people here, in California? We know what's happened in Baja, but over here too. Most of the people who are natives, whose people came from the missions, are not federally recognized. And that might not mean very much to people, but what federal recognition gives is it gives that nation, those people, access to government funds, to a reservation, to basically help these people as their community continues to grow. They don't have that. They have no land base. So when one has no land base, I equate it to it being a tree without roots. It's going to die. But the people that have been hanging in there, and I have to say this, for all of you who are not federally recognized, I take off my hat to you because you haven't given up. You haven't given up who you are. You're not letting that go. And when we talk about language and culture preservation, it's an important thing to us because that's our identity as a people. And I'll let you talk about what you do, but Martha, her family, she comes from a line of basket weavers. Martha learned traditional basket making from her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandmother. They were all alive, and they taught her. On her reservation, they have more basket makers, more traditionalists than any of the reservations on both sides of the border, and they're probably the most isolated of our reservations. Grandma, bakanaba nyipne.
No. Wow, he said a lot of stuff. I already knew what to say. Well, we're talking about the missions again. One of the things we're doing in the schools over there in San Diego is to, especially the school that my son go over there, they can have the opportunity to do the mission project, but to really tell the story about what happened, and then the school will say, well, no, maybe the kids will learn and tell the Kumeyaay story, and so and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. He can do the mission, but he will burn it and stuff like that. But I don't want him to be a bad grade just because he's saying the truth. Because right now, they want to sugarcoat everything, and then the Kumea Nation. I mean, we're a very strong nation on both sides of the border. After all the genocide happened and all these things going on, and we are 2019, and the struggles continue for recognition and respect about the nation. I mean, it's every day. Every day is going on. It's a fight all the time for us. And then, so we put a group together of youth people, young adults in Baja, and then to work for the communities. And then we have a committee inside the communities for education, health, and culture. And then the ones that were outside, we look for resources to help the communities and the people who live in the reservations over there. And then, and with that's an idea to bring the people who live in the city and they don't have that connection with the communities anymore, with our people. It's a way for them to come back and reconnect to our people too, because a lot of people, they go for years and they never come back. And then later they say they're native or they're Kumeyaay, and people would not recognize them as a native people, as a member of the nation. So that's what, because I mean, you're native wherever you go, if you're in the rest or you're not, that means you are not. But if you are outside, that's a good thing to come and help your community and be connected to them. And then sadly, we have the wildfires over there in Baja like a couple weeks ago. And then a lot of the materials in my reservation, they all gone, like the juncas and the willows, because I mean, the fire destroyed a lot of big part of the mountains and then the creeks and stuff like that. And then so I was talking to the elders, what can we do? So we're thinking about to do a restoration program for the native plants over there. But yeah, my map.
So one of the things Martha is talking about is, the materials that are needed to keep our culture going. The juncus grass, the deer grass, the sumac that they used to make the women used to make the baskets. And one of the things that we seen was due to encroachment. I'm not going to say conquered because I don't see myself as a conquered person. You don't see yourself, our people don't see ourselves as conquered. We've had to deal with waves of encroachment, 3 waves. But that encroachment has been, well, our people, we're one of the few tribes in California that make pottery also, along with baskets. And we say that askai, that pot, holds all of our culture, holds who we are as a people. So due to encroachment, it was like that askai, that pot being thrown to the ground and shattered. And each community has a shard of that. So how many of you ever made pottery before? Have anybody? So some of you have made pottery. And when one's going to make a new pot, what does one need? One needs temper. So by grinding up those shards, which is our past, and putting that in with new clay, which is the present, and we fire it again, we make a pot for the future. And that has everything that we've had before, along with the new. So this is when we decided that we needed to develop a pedagogy that's going to support not just language revitalization, but decolonization, decolonizing, revitalization of our culture, and normalizing it. So we developed we created, and it wasn't me, it was a group of us from both sides of the border, all the reservations. We created Kumeyaay Community College. And this college supports this. We have Kumeyaay language classes, Kumeyaay history classes, where our true history, our history gets taught. Many times, and this is one of the reasons I was reacting to what was going on, because this tends to be the mainstream account of history. You hear this one side, and you don't hear the native, side of this story, or the native narrative, and it needs to be heard. So by having these classes, our ethnobotany, ethnoecology, humanities classes, we're teaching our culture, we're teaching our language, we're teaching our history, we're teaching pottery, basket making, all these other things, tool making classes. We teach how to make our villages and what goes with that. All these things. We bring in speakers from both sides of the border, because we also deal with, language dialects. How many of you speak Spanish? How many of you from DF? Okay, how many of these DF people speak Spanish different than people from Baja? Is it a little bit different? Do you talk? But can you still understand each other? Más o menos? Menos o más? Okay. No, but I didn't mean to shotgun you, ladies. I already see you looking at me hard, but you'll get over it. So anyway, but the thing is, same thing in Kumeyaay country. Different reservations have different dialects, but to be able to bring it all in, because the true speaker of the language is somebody that can speak all the different dialects. And also, being able to speak a different language, you're able to look at it, view it through a different lens, through a cultural lens. Martha also teaches the food gathering and preparation. As I said before, her reservation, the San Jose de Lozora reservation, is probably the most isolated and traditional of all the Kumeyaay reservations. So her family had to trap, they had to make their own traps, they had to catch their own food, they had to gather different things like yucca, kupach, acorns, all different things, chia. So she does this. So when she teaches her class, it's an interactive class. They actually go up and they identify the plants, they gathered. It's one of the few classes that I've seen where they actually get full before they even come down to start cooking the stuff. So, it's and everything is culturally or seasonally appropriate. So, the different seasons are gathering different things, and there's a story to that. And when you put all that together, the things that were broken, that shattered on the different parts, come back. My teacher, who passed away, he taught me wildcat or Kumeyaay. Some people hear of like bird songs, but we had 22 different song cycles. Each song cycle has hundreds of songs. And the bird song cycle, the Kumeyaay wildcat song cycle has hundreds of songs, and each song tells a story. So when you put it all together, it's like a book. That is how we passed our knowledge. Also, our creation story takes 3 to 4 days to tell its entirety. And it tells a story about the creation of everything. It tells a story about us. It tells a story about why we do what we do. And for us to be a balanced person. It teaches us to be a good person. So all these put together helps us to bring our communities together, and for our people to heal from the things. Remember, I told you I'm not a conquered person. Our people have been overwhelmed many times, but we haven't run. We're still in our traditional land. We've seen 3 waves come, and we're still here. We've been here for thousands upon thousands of years. We say from time immemorial. And we're going to be here even longer.
And then just to follow up what Stan was saying, one of the fights right now too is the reconnection of the Kumea Nation in San Diego County. Not long ago, they released this new that they find a mastodon bones, and then we went to the Natural History Museum, and they said, well, this is Kumeyaay, they're Kumeyaay people, work with, manipulate bones or whatever. And then, but later they put in the news that they were still looking for the name of the tribe who have to interacting with those bones and stuff like that. And I was like, man, these guys, they don't, that's why we always, with science, because they have their own belief and we have our own belief too, especially for our creation story. And then, especially with Baja, because the INA, the government, they say all the human remains and all the Kumeyaay artifacts and stuff like that, they found that belongs to the government in Mexico. And then that's something very hard for us because that's our ancestors. They dig it up and they put in the museums and stuff like that, very disrespectful. And then we don't have a right to even have a ceremony or do something about it. And then, but like I say, we're still fighting for all this law to change and stuff like that. One of the things too, the Cabrillo National Monument in San Diego, they did a new movie about the first people in San Diego, and then they don't show that anymore when they come and they put the flag in the land. That's not in the movie anymore. And then Juan was one of the actors over there in the movie. He was the little one. It was fishing and stuff like that. All right, Juan. And then working with the kids, especially in my work, we work with a lot of people for like different institutions and schools, private and public schools. And then when the kids come over there, we're trying to teach the real history of the Kumeyaay people, and then encourage them to learn about their own cultures too. One of the activities I really like was working with a High Tech High in Chula Vista or Otay Mesa. They came to the cultural center and we're talking about Kumeyaay culture and stuff like that, and then we encourage them to talk about their own families. And then later they invite us to the school, and then every kid, they write something about their family and how proud they were. Like they were like, my family, they work in in the campo, and that's what we do. We come from Mexico, and they were sharing the language. I mean, so they were very proud, about the family, all the stuff that they did, and they share with everyone. And then the families, they come together, and they were very, very happy to share that information with them too. And then, and then in the school for the Native American Day, we have all the Kumeyaay kids talking about Kumeyaay culture and share with the other ones. And then the other Native kids, they share about their nation too. And then, I think that helps them to come very, very proud of who they are. And then,
Kenapa mayum istawar mayum tipe mat cake Iipay. Oya je melchish ya kakakui je meiwa.
on the border.
How? Kenapa?
Yeah, I know. Another issues too that we have to deal with as the Kumea Nation is split by the border is the crossing permits to come. I mean we have an MOU with the border patrols over there in Tecate, but sometimes what is cultural for us is not cultural for them, so they can deny any permits anytime. And then so yeah, that's still working on it, but I mean we have that in place, but it's hard to understand to have a explain to them what is our culture and stuff like that.
And so pass and repass for the Kumeyaay people going back and forth across the border has been an issue at times. And also we've had issues with the UC system. University of California, San Diego, they found remains by the chancellor's residence. So they did not want to give it back to us. They did not want to repatriate the remains. And NAGPRA, we had to go to, we had to sue them. And for about 20 years, that was ongoing back and forth. We finally, even though they protested, we finally got our remains back for repatriation. These are some of the things that we've had to fight with. And, some of the things that a lot of these, what do we call it, scholars have talked about, these scholars have talked about what has been, how long we've been here. Say, well, you weren't here that long ago. Oh, wait a second. In our stories, we talk about when those islands were mountains and we used to walk over them. It's been documented. We have village sites that are a mile or two on the bed of the Pacific Ocean. We talk about the time when Imperial Valley was a huge lake and our people would live by there. We have fish traps, and that lake went on both sides of the border. We talked about that. So the things that, as far as like the missions and, with the creation of the border and cutting our traditional territory in half, these have been things that our people, the Kumeyaay people, have had to struggle with. However, we continue to work together. We continue to come together and collaborate because who we are, our culture is very important to us.
Now I was just asking if you guys have any question or some comments or something in specific.
Hi. Yeah, I have one question. Most indigenous people already live in urban areas nowadays. At least that's the case in Mexico. So even Mixtecos, Zapotecos, they live in urban areas, most of them. A great number of them live in LA or in San Francisco. They're usually referred to as Mexicans, but they're actually indigenous people that have huge communities in this urban area. Now, they still keep linking, they still have their links to their own towns, their land, but at the same time, they have kids that live in an urban area and have a new Zapotecan culture, which includes painting murals, which includes playing rock in their own language. So my point is, what do we do with indigenous people in urban settings? They have their culture, but they seem to be invisible even for indigenous people that are still see their, like you, their culture as strictly linked to their land. They also have a project, but it seems to be invisible when we talk about indigenous people. How do you deal as an indigenous group, as a native group? How do you relate to indigenous people that are no longer linked to a piece of land? Or they're linked to a piece of land in a neighborhood rather than in the country?
One of the things I've been doing, for example, in the schools with the kids, provide a lot of opportunities for them, a lot of cultural opportunities, activities that they can come to the community as a family, as a community together, and then have those cultural nights, invite all those families, provide dinner for them, and then the schools provide more activities cultural activities for the kids, and then they can learn about the culture, and they share about the culture. And for example, one of the schools before, it was a lot of racism in between the kids because you're not native, or because the other ones are white. When it was all the time a fight between all of them, and after we have that program for the cultural part, because we have non-natives in the program too, because it's a public school, they all come together now, and they are more friends between them. And then and the kids that are native, they are very proud of who they are. They're like, oh, I'm Kumeyaay too. I'm not from this reservation, but I'm Kumeyaay. And then so there are those kind of activities. I see a big change in the community. Then now they're they how to say, they get more closer. And then from Baja, the ones are like they are living outside in the communities because they are working or they go to the university and stuff like that. providing with the group of Tipayhua that we create that's helping them to come together. And then I don't live on my reservation, but people don't look at me like I'm sighted. I'm still part of the community. And then I'm bringing us a lot of people. They're Kumeyaay, but they're not recognized as a part of the communities. So I get a hit because they say, well, why are you supporting those people? They are not from the community. And I said, but yeah, they still are Kumeyaay. This is our family. They're living in Rosarito, they're living in Ensenada, but there's my family, so it's not their fault. The parents or grandparents moved a long time ago. And then, so that's why I'm like working very hard to bring them back together to the community. And then I told them, going back to the community, support your people, help your people in different ways. We do like a school supply run with our Christmas things and whatever with the community, we'll go help with those things. So I bring all those people that are outside already, so to help the community so they can know each other, have that connection. So I'm like, so one day, hopefully the people will be like, oh, this is Kumeyaay people, they will recognize them as always coming and helping the community too. So yeah, that's how we're working. And I think this, it's always hard to, because I was like that too. At one point I was like that too. I'm like, well, these people left, why they need to come back at the reservation and, taking out, our stuff. I was very like that too, but, I was, I learned and I'd be like, you know what? These are our families. And then, yeah.
When you were asking about that, one of the problems when people leave the communities or go into an urban environment, what are they dealing with? They're being saturated with the culture, a foreign culture, through the media, through school, all these different things. So when that happens, when the people are separated, what's going to happen? They're going to be, if they're hearing English all the time or Spanish all the time, they're going to be using it more than their native language. How does one keep the culture? How does one keep the language intact? That's a difficult thing. And I'll just say in Linda Vista in San Diego, there's approximately 20,000 Mixtecos that live over there, immigrant population. I've gone over there to help with language immersion because I also teach language immersion. And the first generation of people, they speak Spanish and English. Well, the ones who just come from Oaxaca, they speak Mixteco, Spanish. Their children speak Spanish, English, and some Mixteco. Then the next generation speaks some Spanish and English. But what is going on? And I talked with many of the people in the communities over there, and they were saying, first thing, the Mexican government looks at Indians as like dogs. And, it was important for us to speak Spanish. That's how we got jobs and things. So now we come to the United States, and if we speak Spanish, they look down upon us. So the big thing is, what is of value? What has the value? And this goes with language, too. So when people don't see a language or a culture has value, then they're not going to be using it. And this is where the attitude of the people needs to change. And it cannot be changed from outside. It's got to be an internal change. Now, they're a large population, so they can afford to lose some speakers, and they can still keep their language and culture relatively intact. But now with the Kumeyaay people, on both sides of the border, there's approximately 4,623 Kumeyaay, in San Diego and in Baja. Of that 4,623, there's approximately 45 people who still speak the language. This is a problem, because when you have small groups like that, the less speakers you have, the less opportunities you have for people in order to use the language. And your language becomes endangered. The vibrancy of a language is measured not by how many of the adults speak the language, but how many of the children speak. You can have all the adults speaking, but if you have none of the children speaking, that language is in danger. And if you look at the 9 factors of language vitality and loss, on a scale of 5, which is stable, to 0, extinct, the Kumeyaay language would be rated as 1, which is critically endangered. So, and I'm going to finish this real quick, is in order to reverse language shift, we have to get drastic, because the boarding schools in the United States have played a big part in how do you say, hurting our language, keeping our people from teaching it. And in Baja California, Mexico, I have to say this, las escuelas bilingües, they're not bilingual escuelas. They bring Mexican teachers that come in and they tell the parents the same thing. If you want your children to do good in school, don't teach them the Indian language, teach them Spanish. So you have two hegemonic languages coming together with Kumeyays or other border tribes, and what's happening? You have people that are struggling. If we want to reverse language shift, we have to get drastic. We have to develop immersion schools that just focus on the native language. It's like a reverse boarding school. That's the only way we are going to reverse language shift. And it's got to happen soon while we still have speakers. So,
Yeah, I would add something. The cities have never been homogeneous. So all cities have huge numbers of languages and cultures, yet not all are treated the same. So if you're a French speaker in LA, you'll get your school in French. If you're a German, you'll get your school in German or Japanese. But if you're a Kumeyaay or if you're a Zapotec, you won't get a school in your language. You won't have a community space for your community. So I would just add one example of an ethnic community that lives the same situation but that has never had a land, which are the deaf communities. Deaf communities have their own culture, have their own language, but they're always been in urban areas, and they have always demanded communities and true bilingual schools, in the sense that face-to-face interaction should be in their language, in their school. Yeah, I would head toward the drastic measures.
thank you.
Over here. Yes, I have two questions, I think, for both Marta and Stan. The first one, and Marta briefly talked about a museum experience, a blotched museum experience. I think it didn't go very well. But my first question is if you have had experiences of working with museums, whether missions museums or otherwise in California and Mexico, and how does the experience been? And the second question is, Stan mentioned about the importance of learning and teaching the indigenous view of the history. I was wondering what sources do you use, because we know that they are pervasively written from the other perspective. So could you please talk us a bit more about these two things?
Mat ni hepok, puknache moya nyep chaaka hamok, ni wala terchech nyina.
Oh, okay. You said, what is that?
About the museum?
The museum. Oh.
My picture.
Well, okay, yeah, well, yeah. Well, my experience with working at the Cultural Center Museum over there is it's a tribal museum, so we have a lot of. We have the rules and regulations, they have in United States, but we have a lot of, because we have our own tribal government, and then so we don't have to really, we do our own thing on there too. But one part the part that I like to be working in the museum is that we have already a place so we can get our things back, like all the artifacts and stuff like that. We do the mitigation stuff like that and bring it home, and then we can decide if we want to put it in display or want to, how do you say, matriarch, or put it back in the Mother Earth. And that's what we do sometimes. And then that's what I really like working in the museum, because we have the opportunity to do that. Because a lot of the things before we have the museum, before a lot of the artifacts and stuff like that found in San Diego, they all go to the archaeological center, and then they have it over there just in boxes and boxes, and who knows what they do with that. And then, so having a tribal museum over there, that gives us the opportunity to put it back on Mother Art if we decide to do that. And then I have a few friends that work in the museums, and they're very, they are very. I think it's a tough decision too, especially for the one that work with the NACRA, and they had to deal with our ancestors every day. It's a tough work, I think. And then I have one of my friends that she's working with that, and she's Kumeyaay, and she have a lot of respect, and she do all the ceremonies and things that she need to do so she don't get sick and stuff like that, and really have a lot of respect for that. And then talking about the museums and in Baja, that's very different with the law, because we just have a meeting with the new director over there in Baja, and then because we want to do a ceremony over there, because we have a lot of sacred sites in Baja, so we want to do a Kumeyaay ceremony, and then so we're working with that on that. But when they're talking about human remains and things like that, there's a lot of work we need to do, because the law, is not on our side. And then and that, a lot of close to my reservation, they did a lot of diggings, and then men and women, they took it out from there. And then I know they have some human remains outside of Mexico. He says it's none, but I think there are some, and hopefully we can bring them back in the future. Thank you.
And when you were talking about creating things, or state your question again. The history.
Yeah, but before that, perhaps, yes, the second question was about the sources you use to teach and elaborate a history from the indigenous perspective. But as from the first question, everything Marta just said is very interesting. But I wondered also if you had any experience of being called to do for consultation, for example, in museums. If this has happened for any of the mission museums, have you been consulted or know of any other indigenous group being consulted and what the result has been?
Okay. For that, the question that you just asked, I have been consulted on both sides of the border. I've made things, certain Kumeyaay items like sandals, rattles, things like this, tule boats for museums on this side of the border. And I also was Shuiski Museo allá en DF.
The National History Museum of DF.
Yeah, the National Museum made 2 rattles for them.
What's it?
Yeah, made 2 rattles for them, and they're in the museum now. So was consulted and did make that for them. Huh?
Well, yeah, talking about that part too is I don't think in Baja we have the INA don't have a consultation with the communities. They do their own thing. One of the things we're talking to the new director of INA in Baja is to have an advisory board from the communities in Baja, so we can work together. And then, so in that part, we know too what's going on. We know with the things that they're part of our nation, even though he says it's not ours, says it's from the government. But anyways.
Yeah. So, and the other question that you asked is where we get our sources. And as I said earlier, our songs, our stories, they tell a history. Our elders will pass down historical narratives of what took place, and it passes from generation to generation to generation. And we still have elders who are knowledge bearers, and they talk about it. And like I said, I'm a Kumeyaay singer, I'm a wildcat singer, I've also learned how to sing Iipay, which is another song cycle, and Xolok, which is the lightning song cycle. So 3 different song cycles. Each one tells a story. And from those songs, this is where we get our history. So, yes, when we take a look at the European version, they leave a lot of things out. I mean, it becomes myopic when you view it through their lens. And being able to hear it through a native lens, a native viewpoint, you then see the whole story. So that's where we get that from. Okay.
A lot of the stuff that KCC is doing, Kumeyaay Community College, is development. A lot of instructors too. For example, most of all the instructors, the professors at Kumeyaay College, they are Kumeyaay, and then they're specialists in what they're teaching too. Yeah.
Hi, I had a question for Stan. This morning, quite movingly, you I think I understood saying that you felt it would have been you'd been just as happy if they lit fire to the artworks and knocked down the missions, and I completely understand why you said that. Do you think that there's a role to be played by these missions as a memorial to an episode in human history, as awful as it was? And do you think there's a reason to keep them open and accessible to the public? And if so, what would the role of your people be? Let's talk about San Diego de Alcalá, because that's the one in your territory. What would be your contribution to that, or do you just think it's not worth protecting? I'm just very interested.
My pecha moya mayum ya we wampu pa yo ta my hanyawa nya pum nyuop ko shawan. How? Yes. So we did do something like that. We went over to the mission on November 5th to commemorate the anniversary of the burning of it. And the deacons were beside themselves. They were running around. They were trying to stop us. Finally, it was a priest that came and said, let them be. They're telling their side of the story. So they let that happen.
What did you do? Did you have an event?
We had an all-night sing to commemorate the attack of the mission. And we did a Iipay, or a war dance, to commemorate the brave heroes that went over there. And just how do you say, just put a stop to the injustices that were being perpetrated upon our people. So, and during that time, we also talked about the history. We had elders talk about the history of what happened, why when the missions came, what they were doing to the people. I mean, they were raping kids, they were raping boys and girls. I mean, when you talk about, these, missionaries, these priests coming, I mean, that's pretty sick.
So who came? Was there an audience? Were there a mixed audience?
It was Kumeyaay that came from the different reservations, singers, dancers, knowledge keepers, storytellers, and we were there all night. We sang and we told the stories. Now there were, like I said, the deacons were put off by it, but there were some people coming in, just regular people, just walking by. They heard the story. It wasn't mainly for them. It was mainly for our own people.
Yeah.
Give them, to teach them what was going on, to tell our story, to tell that.
But would you see a value in doing that, say, every year and inviting people in general and making a sort of an event of it? Or is that too personal?
My beja.
Well, we try to, in the past, we tried to work with example, what is the Mission Foundation or something like that? The Mission Foundation, they have some kind of event. And then we went over there and they would say, okay, well, we'll share our part of our own story. And they would not even allow us to go inside of the building. It was a one Kumeyaay person they allowed to come over there with his family. And that's only because they say it was the show for them. And they will pay for that show. So they got what they want. But they don't want to hear the true story. And then even one of the ladies from the foundation, the Mission Foundation, it was pushing one of our people.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was ugly.
So you're getting serious pushback from the.
At times we get serious pushback, and sometimes our own people are our own worst enemies. People, and we talked about this when Father Sarah got, canonized. It was,
Oh, he was canonized.
yes. Prior to
really?
that, we were having meetings, and it was a California Indian that was pushing for it.
Really?
Oh yeah, and you were there when we had that meeting, and we had words to say to him, but it was like going in one ear and out the other. He was adamant about it, and they used him as the spokesperson in order to have this done when most people were against it. So
What if I asked you this question?
Sure.
What if you magically? What if the state or whoever owns these places gave them back to your people, gave the missions back to your people? Would you preserve them, and if so, how would you turn them into an educational experience for the rest of the people?
I'm glad you brought that up, because the Spanish, I guess, Spanish presence in California was about 50-some years.
Yeah, it's not very long.
Yeah, it wasn't very long. Then when Mexico gained independence, Mexico promised that they were going to secularize the missions and give the land back to the native people. What they did was they gave it to Spaniards who were born in Mexico, made these estancias. And that caused another wave of reprisals. And San Diego almost fell 3 times to Kumeyaay attacks. The town of San Diego almost fell 3 times. The last time, it was repelled by a British schooner in the bay that used cannons. It got so bad that the governor of California went down into central Mexico, freed a bunch of prisoners in the prison system, turned it into his Cholo militia. They kept San Diego from being overrun. So, I mean, yeah, when we talk about the Mexican, we're not talking about the Mexican people, we're talking about the Mexican government and what they did. This is historical. You'll probably have to dig that up to find that historic. But going back to what you're saying, that land is native land. The people who lived and died there, they deserve something. Their descendants deserve something.
That's right.
And, and that's what goes back again to the people who are not federally recognized. It's pretty much almost all the people that have resided on those missions, those 21 missions. If the Catholic Church, if the government would do the right thing and return that land to those people and
What would you
give
do
them
to
an
it?
opportunity for federal recognition so that they can regroup and give them an opportunity to gain, gain more lands for that. That is to me, that is part of that process of correcting that. Just saying I'm sorry.
No, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
just saying I'm sorry and allowing that to continue. That's completely wrong. That's like shooting somebody in the stomach and spraying some Bactine on them.
Yeah.
But
But if that miraculously happened, what would you do to the buildings and to the collections? Just interested. How would you? I mean, would you?
I hear what you're saying.
Would you keep them as an educational experience to show people the awful things that happened and how this should never happen again? Do they have some kind of role that way?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to piggyback on what you said, and I would leave it to each indigenous group to decide what they were going to do.
Yeah.
If it was our people, uj mecha,
That's why I asked you about San Diego, because
San Diego. Well, the mission that's over there now is not what it was.
That's another very valid point you made, that they don't look a lot like what they did.
It does not. I mean, this has been like a really touched up, Mediterraneanized,
With, fake
yeah.
stuff and yeah.
Yeah, no. What it was an adobe structure with thatched roofs. So I would just say, wushlap. Make it realistic if you're going to do anything, and make it look like how it looked on November 6th. So. Maja?
We have time for another question.
It's time to ask, what can I do from the other side? Okay? And I have one big idea, which is call your congressperson and say, enough. We need clean water for these communities. We need more land. I agree with you. Land is the key. I've done research on that, and land is the key. And I think that given that we don't have representation in Hollywood, I mean, there's only very few representation of our stories, Indigenous or otherwise. We have like the same story in Hollywood over and over and over and over again ad infinitum, ad nauseam. So I think that it behooves for us to begin asking, what should I do from outside the community instead of pressuring the community? I think we need to allow the space for each community to decide what is best for them, because we don't even comprehend a lot of times how information is passed along. This idea that we give, I mean, that was so beautiful, Marta. Like, we're putting it back to Mother Earth. That is like a foreign concept for us. Here I am thinking like, no, don't destroy anything because it's evidence. And I still do believe that. But I would respect what a community would do. But here's the thing for the rest of the lay people. Call your congressperson right now. Figure out who the congressperson is and call them and say, we need clean water, whatever the communities need. Those needs should be met. And I know that we're talking to scholars here, but still, I think it would be important that if we make money out of the scholarship, I think we could make a phone call to the congressperson and say, enough.
Is there another question?
Time for one more? Okay.
Hi. Thank you very much for being here and for your words and for everything that you've really enlightened us with. And yes, the California missions went through a total revamp or a completely, total change in the 20th century. So anyway, as a scholar, quote unquote, what would you say to the newer generation who don't want to completely neglect this and want to approach it through an empirical and an institutionalized manner that is approved only by the institution? How do we continue forward and bring this to light and make it legitimate within that institution, within this space?
Oh, I would just want to share. I think like as a college, you have the voice for the people in the communities. They don't have the opportunity to be here, so you're the person to help them to make the change. Give the opportunity, the voice to those people that they cannot come over here and be in the school, and then because a lot of the institutions, universities and stuff like that, when they're talking about Native people, they have non-Native people talking about our nations just because they have a degree. If you have that position and you can do a change and give it the voice to those elders and those people, pardon, I'm sorry, I think that's a big help for our communities. I think it's time for us to speak, about our nation. Even, we have broken English or Spanish or whatever other language, but I think it's time for us to raise and be talking about ourselves. I think it's time. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And for me, I mean, listening to what you're saying, that tends to happen quite a bit. It tends to be the rule. So what happens when you deal with this type of recalcitrance? You can either, go with the flow, or sometimes you just have to, step outside of the box and stand up for your convictions. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me, and remember I told you that there's songs. Each song tells a story. Well, it reminds me of this story, and if you don't mind, I'd like to say this. There was a group of people, they were on a path, and they were walking down the road, and they came to a fork, and they said, we either go to the left or we go to the right. And some people said, let's go to the left. And others said, let's go to the right. And they got into a big argument because they said, if we go the wrong way, we might die. We might not have water or food or whatever. So they said, what do we do? So they called the Kumeyaay, the medicine man. And they said, please help us. Help us to decide where to go. So the Kumeyaay had a sha'ara, had a staff. And he said a prayer, and he said, do we all agree that whichever way this sha'ara goes, this is the way we will follow? And they all agreed. So the Kumeyaay said the prayer, and then he let the sha'ara go. And it went to the left, then it went to the right, then it went back, then it fell straight forward. It was a place where there was no path. So what they had to do was they had to make a new path. And what that story tells us is that sometimes we see it as either one way or another way. We don't realize that we can make a new way for ourselves. It may be something that no one has done in a long time, but we have that ability. And this is a song that goes with it. So remember I said each song tells us something. It tells us the right way to live. It gives us inspiration and it gives us hope. So even when you run into people like that, there's always a way around it. There's always a way you can do things. So that's all I have. Ima?
So I just had one thing to say in closing here. Coming back to the theme of the conference, so art, American art, and the history and culture and material culture of the missions. As scholars who are interested in material culture, we have a certain set of responsibilities, and we are advocating for adding one, and that is that the value of the material culture and the missions themselves and their histories and what they embody actually is most important when it's in the service of the larger context of that history and that culture. And having people like Stan and Marta here to remind us, what that history of the missions is and who it's for, tells us that we have to do research on material culture that actually helps these big communities in some way, past or present and future. That's a responsibility that we should all be attentive to going forward.
Thank you.
Join me in thanking them for an amazing final panel. Extremely important. We're like doing critical mission studies moment by moment here today. And I'm really so grateful to everyone for their honesty and their openness and incredible research that we've heard about today, and for the willingness to participate in these difficult conversations, because this is how we're going to move forward. And I'm very grateful to have this final panel today. So the next thing that happens is reception and drinks and food. That's outside on the patio where we had lunch, and then we'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Everyone's welcome to come back. But let's continue our conversations. Because we're a university, there are all these strict rules about alcohol, so you can only have a drink if you have your little bracelet. If you're a speaker, the bracelet's in your folder, or we can get one, but they may ask you to show ID even if you look like you're over 21. So I'm going to take it as a compliment if they make me show my ID. But thank you. One more round of applause. Thank you so much.